I
waiting
can hear
room.
you. I can hear you. Good morning.
Hi, how you doing?
Wonderful.
We got our waiting room still clearing out. Hang on. Everybody. The chat is live. It can work. You can say good morning and chat with each other as you see fit or as you want. Let's see. I think our waiting room is just about, yeah, 2 more in the waiting room that are joining. Let them join up and then we'll get started. It's good to see everybody either on your name on the screen as participant or on your face on the screen. It's good to see all of you. For some of you that may not even know who I am, because it's been a while since I've ran a meeting, my name is Paul Knighton. Together with Denise Knighton, who's here, we are founders of More Realty, I guess is something we could say. Jim Burgum is traveling today, who usually runs this meeting. And so we excuse his absence today. I'm going to change this over there. So just a reminder, today is our weekly More Realty meeting. Much of what we talk about relates to Oregon. We understand anyone can be on here from any state. We just want you to know there is some information that is relevant to anyone who would practice real estate, whether it's the firm or whether it's just general announcements, general information. So we're glad that all of you are here. We do want to welcome some people who have joined since we last met. Since last Tuesday, Rick Carter in Bend, Walter Purdy in Las Vegas, Michelle, I apologize, Michelle, I may not pronounce this correct, Michelle Board. I apologize if that's incorrect. I want to say Bourdet because it looks French, but we welcome you. Melissa Hartvigsen, Lizette Hermo in Salem, Jolie Lohman in New Mexico, and Maggie Jones in Portland. I'm pretty sure I pronounced all those fairly accurately. So thank you for being here, all of you at More. It's great, exciting to see people join in multiple locations as well. As a reminder, we do offer an incentive. If you refer someone in, we do give you $100 cash incentive. When you get to the 5th one you referred in, we give you an additional a total of $750. So if you end up referring 5 people that join, you get like about $1,150. So that's kind of the incentive that's out there. So for anyone who'd like to take advantage of that. We want to thank Brandy Smith and Chelsea, who are both on here, for providing our CE credit today, and we will give them a second to announce whatever they want to say. Thank you. Brandy, it looks like you're going to be talking.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paul, and thank you, More, for having us be a part of your Tuesday brokerage meeting. And I just wanted to let you guys know that your e-certificates, they do take about 3 to 5 business days. They go to the email address that you registered for this class. And I just want to send like a friendly reminder. I may have said this, numerous times, but we still continue to get calls about, your First AM website not working. And that is because on November 1st, you will no longer be able to access it at all. It will be gone. So if you haven't received an invitation from Chelsea or myself on our new website called Ignite RE, it's basically the same website, but it's just all of those other websites that you had to go to different sites to all in one spot. So it's going to be where you can pull your trios, have your sheets, marketing materials, there's farming materials in there for you guys. And so, like I said, if you haven't received an invitation from Chelsea and I, please reach out. We'll make sure to get your invite sent. And if you guys ever need a demo on how to use it, because they keep doing awesome updates in there and creating good content for you, we would love to be able to, do a one-on-one with you to show you that. And we've added some QR codes in some pieces. So that's really great for capturing any leads that you guys are sending out there for your marketing materials. And Chelsea, do you have anything that you'd like to say?
Yeah, good morning. Just to piggyback on what Brandy said, Ignite RE is a great tool for you guys to use. There's a lot of agents that are having some really good luck incorporating in Ignite RE and meeting with Brandy and I, helping them get listings, guys. So if any of you are interested in finding out or understanding what some of these agents are doing to get listings, reach out to either Brandy or myself. We're happy to schedule a time to review it with you. There are some great kind of tricks of the trade, so to speak, that agents are using right now to help them secure more listings. So again, reach out to either myself or Brandy. We're happy to walk you through it. Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I do see a lot of people on here that may have not been on the meeting when it was announced they were new. Just know we announce everybody, and if you didn't hear your name today, we did announce you. We want to make sure you feel welcome. I just see Jay Westfall there. I don't know if he was here last week or not. Want to make sure that everybody who is here for the first time, to just know that we acknowledge you and we're glad you're here. And thank you, Chelsea and Brandy. Appreciate that. Our mortgage moment will be Scott Munns with Mutual Omaha Mortgage. And Scott, I've got your stuff ready to go right here.
Awesome.
And a lot of slides here, Scott. Scott promised to keep it.
I'm sorry. Good morning, Scott Munns, Mutual of Omaha Mortgage.
Sorry about that. Here we go.
That's all right. Appreciate you. And yeah, looks like you're going to have to be the go through the slides for me. If you can go to the next slide real quick. I'm going to briefly go over a few slides, and then I'll hopefully send out whoever wants more information. We'll send it out to you, but I'm going to briefly go through a few cool slides and some information I found. I'm not sure as realtors what you guys have access to or what you use, but this website, Altos Market Data, for any zip code you want to find exact information on zip codes and what kind of market you're in, you can go to Altos Market Data. As you can see, it shows median list price in 97224, around 700,000, new listings around 800,000 coming on the market. And I'm not positive on how accurate the data is compared to what you guys find, but I find this very interesting. So I'm not going to go through the whole slide deck, but it's a very cool website. I recommend you all check it out on Altos Market if you have access to it. Okay, let's go to the next slide real quick. Mortgage rates. This is the fun part, right? We all know rates are high. We don't know what to expect as much as you do, to be honest with you. Every time we think we're going to go down, they go up. So we'll just say that currently around 7 3/8 on a conforming loan, but we've been locking lower than that with most people buying down the rate, of course, along with a 2-1 buy down, 3-1 buy down we have access to. But FHA, we locked one yesterday in the probably 6.75, I think was the one we locked yesterday. So still decent rates out there. If you do the discount points, we can get our hands on it. I am the manager, so I can do a little bit more incentive for you guys and your clients, just so you know. I just closed one with Brooklyn Morgan in 2 weeks. Got a screaming deal for a client, close in 2 weeks, and very happy client. So the idea is to get people in homes now before the market goes crazy, before the equity goes up, and then they can refinance later if they want to. Okay, next slide. I'm going to briefly go over just some real quick highlights. You probably have heard all these non-QM, non-qualified mortgage loans out there, but I just want to remind you, we have access to them too. And if you have anybody that needs anything outside of the box of conforming FHA, VA, please reach out to me. The bank statement loan, I'm closing one next week. In-house conforming loan would have been about $5,000 a month income. Went through the bank statement loan process through our broker channel and got $35,000 monthly income off the bank statements, just to show you the difference that a bank statement loan can do for your self-employed borrowers. Along with the 1099 income loan we have, the no tax returns are required, just 1099s, and they go off those earnings, just so you know. Okay, next slide. And I'm briefly highlighting these. We'll go into them more later if you want to reach out to me, or I'll try and get your emails and send them to you. Investor cash flow DSCR loan you might have heard about for investment properties. No personal income or employment information required, just the property cash flow. So for investors, this is huge for cash flow. I-10 mortgage loans, kind of a buzzword. We do have access to the I-10 loan you might have heard about. So if you have more information on those, let me know. And then next slide real quick. Portfolio select is 1 year seasoning out of foreclosure and short sale, deed of lieu. That's huge. So just know 1 year out of foreclosure, short sale, and deed in lieu. As you know, on a conforming loan, you need like 7 years. FHA is 4 years. So on this one, 1 year. That's huge. Asset qualifier, no employment, no income, no DTI. That sounds like 1999. But it is just going off their assets. Basically, if they have plenty of assets in the bank, 25% down, then we can do asset qualifier, no income needed. So those are the quick highlights of the non-QM loans we can do for you guys. Please reach out to me. I'll put my information in here. Chris Suit on my team in Vancouver is going to introduce himself. Chris, why don't you say hello and let everybody know what you have access to?
You bet. Hey, everybody. Hello, hello. This is Chris, of course, and I run the Vancouver office. And just a quick note here, we have become the preferred lender for a couple of major companies here in the area. Peace Health, Miller Paint, Providence, all the Providence offices, St. Joseph Hospital, and all their offices. And what that means for you guys is that if you have a client that's an employee of any of those companies, they can receive up to $4,000 in lender credit through their employee benefits program. So we have just become locked into their employee benefits program, which is a big, big plus for your clients. And
Thank you,
that's the latest news.
That's awesome. Thank you. And more information on that, we'll put our contact information in the chat. Paul, thank you, and Team Moore, we appreciate you and the opportunity. There's other slides on here in reverse, but we'll send that out to you. So if you have any questions on reverse too.
Eric has already put that in chat, just so you know. So everybody has access to the PDF, and there are a couple questions in there, Scott, if you want to engage there as well.
We'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Laura Holm, quick announcement about More Gives. We have an event next week. She just wants to briefly update you on that.
Yep, thank you. I'll be quick. Just wanted to remind everybody again that we have our bingo event a week from today on Tuesday, 11 to 1 p.m. here at the Moore office in Tigard. Bingo is on the house. Anybody can come play. We just ask that you please RSVP so that we can plan accordingly and make sure we have enough seats. Put the link in the chat here in a minute to RSVP. We are benefiting Pile of Puppies this year, and a really exciting update. We are actually going to have a pile of puppies in attendance. So the nonprofit that we're supporting is actually bringing puppies to the event. So hopefully that convinces you if you weren't already convinced. So we hope to see a lot of you there, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
Two quick things. We were going to have people buy bingo cards to play. You don't need to do that anymore. However, donations are accepted. So you don't have to not donate. You certainly feel like you want to make a donation to More Gives or the cause. You certainly are welcome to. Pile of Puppies is a foundation that's been around for many, many years that takes their puppies into people who are sick or in hospice or in a hospital and let the puppies lick and play on them in a calming manner. And it's kind of like a service they provide to sick children, sick adults. Sometimes one of the last things someone will do on earth is play with a pile of puppies. So that's their organization. So any donations to that will go to help provide services and kind of some comfort in that way to people who are struggling and suffering in a variety of ways. So that's what Pile of Puppies is. Fair enough, Blair? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's great. And can I just say one more thing?
Yep.
Just as a reminder, this event will replace our regular Tuesday meeting. So
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, just wanted to remind everybody.
Yeah, so next week we will not have this meeting. We will be, in lieu of that, we'll be holding a get together. And if you want to just come hang out and just say hi to everybody, it's really nice to get together and socialize. We really like that. We used to have meetings, we had 60, 70 people who would attend in live and in person. And that was 3.5 years ago, almost 4 years ago now. And so to get people together was a really nice thing to do. I went to the effort to, so we're moving on to the meat and potatoes of today's meeting. I went to the effort to create the slide. So I didn't want to deny myself the opportunity to show it to you because it's fall now. But today we are going to have a CE class against provider as Brandy Smith, Fatco, First American Title Company, Brandy Smith and Chelsea Riley. They will be providing certificates. If you have questions on your certificates, don't email me, don't email agent support. It is Chelsea and or Brandy who can help you with your certificate. And they've put their contact information in the chat, and I imagine they'll put it again in case you missed it. But if you have questions on your certificates, please contact them. And I am today the instructor for today's class. Some of this information might look really, really familiar. It's titled something different, categorized as something different, but it's something I've taught before multiple times over the years. And there's a couple little nuances and changes that I want to point out. That said, some of the information and direction given in this class may surprise you. We're talking about real estate agents' do's and don'ts for transactions with tenants. That's a topic for today. And the information I'm giving is applicable anywhere we are. There's not going to be credit for anyone except Oregon, unfortunately, CE credit, but the information is relevant for wherever we are. I want to first thank you for the comments about my screen. I appreciate that. I want to make sure I point something out that More Realty is presently not set up as a property management for property management. And that's by design, and that's actually by our choice. Over the years, I've had many people approach me and say, I'd like to manage my friend's door, or I got a duplex I can manage for somebody. And I will always, I'll be set up for that. And we were set up at one point. And about 3 years ago, we just said, okay, never mind. Because we'd done it for 2 years and we were managing a total of 10 doors. And we were making maybe about $500 a month. And it just didn't pencil out as a company. And then you have to make sure that people know what they're doing. And the people who know what they're doing and don't know what they're doing with regards to tenants in Oregon and Washington is changing drastically because the rules change. They change all the time. That, and then when people find out, well, the office is going to get some sort of split for that because you're using our license, our our tools, our resources. When they find out there's some sort of split, they all of a sudden don't want to do it, which is always interesting to me. I'm going to mute that one there. Okay. So we presently are not set up for property management. If you are doing property management for a relative or yourself, meaning like your mom or your dad or something like that, there is provision within the Oregon statutes with property management allow you to do that on your own without our supervision. So if you're doing that, especially if there's new people on here, please send me an email at paul@morerealty.com. Say I'm property managing for my brother or my own properties, just so that we are aware. What we are not set up for, we haven't had the trusted account set up for like 3 or 4 years. And here's a reason for this is because I think the next slide says it. Tenant laws are a minefield, which you will eventually trigger a landmine to go off. And unless you're a lawyer or a property manager that's qualified, trained, up to speed on this, you're running into that minefield blindfold. You really are. And so a lot of times there are actually quite a few attorneys who choose not to practice or go anywhere near tenant laws because it's so convoluted and a kind of a mess to deal with. And if attorneys don't want to do it, then it questions if we're qualified, right? Most real estate complaints, arbitrations, mediations, small claims, et cetera, come from either dual agency, tenant law situations, or disclosure situations. That's where almost all of them come from. The tenant laws have been changing drastically over the years. And see, I think my next slide. So the purpose of this slide is not to teach you how to interpret, understand, or provide guidance to your clients as it relates to tenant laws. That's by design. If I don't know how to vacuum the floor, or I just do it wrong, my wife's going to say, stop vacuuming the floor, I'll take care of it. And if I don't know how to fix a problem on a computer, no one's ever going to ask me how to fix it. If I don't know how to load a listing in the MLS, I'll never be asked to do it. So in that sort of vein, if you're not trained on the tenant laws and the tenant statutes and the tenant guidelines, even as a real estate agent, you will not be tempted to answer questions. And that's really important, that you do not answer questions you are not qualified to answer. There's the design in that. And Airbnb rules are driven by the area located, permits, et cetera, is applicable, not tenant laws. Airbnb has a lot of changes in the news lately too. Some cities and municipalities are actually making them, they're not illegal, but they're disallowing them in some areas. I think Dallas, Texas, New York, places like that are actually disallowing Airbnb. But Airbnb are not subject to tenant laws. The purpose of class is also not to discuss or debate the merits of any of the tenant laws. There are strong opinions in either direction. They should be stronger, they should be weaker. It's not fair to the homeowner. Who cares about the home? I mean, and everything in between. The purpose of class is not to discuss merits of those laws or the opinions on whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. But Oregon and Washington in particular have some really stringent, really convoluted, complicated tenant laws. And if you delve into those areas, you're going to find yourself in some trouble. The purpose of the class is to give you the best guidance as it relates to agents as a real estate agent and the best advice you can give your clients. It's all about risk management, and use less is more when it comes to guiding a buyer or seller when tenants are involved. Less is more. Less is more protection, less is more risk management, less is just the way to go. As an FYI, the most recent House bill in Oregon, 2000-001, signed by the governor, is 65 pages long of changes and adoptions. Here it is. I'll bring it up close. It's 65 pages. Over here, skipping the end, there's page 65. Page 65. We can't even get a lot of agents to pay attention to do the disclosures correctly. How do you think we as real estate agents can possibly understand a House bill this complicated? Now, when you take that House bill, there's the state guidelines. If you go to Multnomah County, they have their additional overlays. They're even more stringent, layered on top of state guidelines. And if you do things wrong, you will own the responsibility for the financial impact. I have shared this story before with certain groups and classmen. Will share it again. About 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago, I got a call from somebody. It was a referral from one of our agents living out of state. Seller was living in Northern California and said, I want to sell my house. It's off Colonial in Portland, just right off of I-5 there, northwest Portland. And over there by Kaiser on Northwest, if you know where that is. Old Portland house, had a tenant in the basement and a tenant in the second floor, excuse me. And said she'd already contacted the tenant and gave them notice. Said, okay, so you clearly understand the tenant laws. You know what, you've done that correctly, I assume, correct? So yes, I'm good. We're friends. It won't matter anyway. There's no risk because we're friends. Famous last words in real estate. If anyone tells you that, your red flag should go up. But she was supposedly friends, and it was her mom's house. And so I went through the process. My standard of practice was, okay, sign this form. And I need a written authorization for me to coordinate showings with the tenants. I'm not going to do it without them, and I'll copy you on everything. And so I communicate with the tenant, okay, how do you want showings to occur? What kind of notice, access, all that kind of stuff. Had it very clear, very well written out. And that home was in such poor shape, we could not get a buyer except from someone who's going to rehab the house. It was that tough. I couldn't believe anyone was living in it, honestly. The top floor was the best floor. The basement was the old scary basements that you remember from the houses built in the 40s or 40s. I think it was built in the 40s. And so we went on to close. The only buyer that we could find was, I'm going to mute this one. Okay, the only buyer we could find was an investor to rehab the house. So she wanted to proceed forward with that. This is really the best and only offer we had. We went and did that. And about a month later, after we closed, she calls me. The seller calls me and says, what happened? This tenant is now suing me because I didn't give her notice correctly. I didn't post it correctly. And I didn't offer her, what do they call it? Not cash for keys, relocation money. So it was all these things that she didn't do outside of my visibility, but also outside of my expertise. I told her to talk to an attorney. I directed her to an attorney or property manager. I don't need that. We're friends. Okay. And so there are a lot of enterprising attorneys out there, and some real estate agent told this tenant, I really made me mad. I wish I knew who the agent was. This agent told the tenant, well, if they didn't give you notice correctly, you could probably get a bunch of money out of them because of tenant loss on this. So this agent literally referred this tenant to go sue my client. And in tenant laws, you were guilty until proven innocent. And regardless of the outcome, you are paying for the tenant's legal bills. There's no seller wins. The seller never wins in this. And so $18,000 this person had to write a check for because she didn't give notice the right way, the right timing, all this other stuff she didn't understand with not only state law, but with the and she did on her own. But I had deferred her and warned her, but she'd already done most of that stuff before I was ever involved. So as an agent, though, even some of the stuff she was telling me, I'm like, geez, I didn't know that was a thing. I certainly called her attorney and said, is that a thing? He goes, yeah, that's a thing. And she better just write that check, because the more that other attorney is involved, the bill just goes up. So this is about risk management. And again, if we have a hard time understanding disclosures, et cetera, how are you going to understand a house bill as relates to tenants? And city or county overlays that are complex, expensive. And if you advise and guide your client incorrectly about tenant laws and things go sideways, guess who's writing that check? You are as the agent. There's no avoiding it. So what is the very best? And so we're going to talk about what's the best thing to do is in here. I already provided a couple examples. I got ahead of myself. Let me go over some paperwork here, though. I'm a little out of order on my slides, but I wanted to. I showed you. There is in the RM and the ORF. I'm only going to refer to the ORF forums. I am not versed enough on the OAR forums or Oregon Realtors forums to speak to them cohesively. So I just want to show you the OAR or ORF version of forms in the R that we are found in SkySlope. So there is in SkySlope, or excuse me, in ORF forms or SkySlopes, however, zip forms, however accessing them, advisory regarding tenant occupied property. Very first lines, buyers considering purchase of a property occupied or to be occupied by tenants should conduct due diligence beyond the typical property purpose. And there's laws and rules because if housing is important to individuals and society, federal, state, and local laws and rules govern many aspects of landlord-tenant relationships, and it advises the buyer to become familiar with them. None of it says the agent should advise you, and you should not. Don't go understand the law. Matter of fact, I would advise you never to attend a class going to be taught by an attorney or someone else who teaches you the tenant laws. Because again, if I know how to fix RMLS, I'm going to be stuck fixing RMLS. If you don't know the laws, rules, and the tenant laws, you're never going to be, you say, I don't know them, talk to an attorney. That is really easy to do. You won't be tempted. That's my position. That's my advice. Buyers should consult with an experienced property manager or landlord tenant attorney about these issues. Then it goes through and talks about some other things. And then it has a line here I don't like, the way they've written this one. Unless your agent is an expert in landlord tenant law, because it kind of implies that you might be, or you might think you are. Their name should not be referred to tenants for help with landlord tenant issues at all. But this is the form. Buyers and sellers should ask their real estate agents to include contingencies in their sales agreement that allow investigations or resolution of the issues described in this advisory. The one place where if you have them sign this is that where you get pulled into a responsibility is you should be at least aware of contingencies to give people opportunities to investigate and research and understand certain things about tenants involved in transactions. And this means when I say tenants involved in a transaction, if you are representing a buyer and buying a home that's tenant occupied and you're buying it for your primary residential use, I would never accept that home until the tenant has been vacated, in my opinion, simply because once that closes and that tenant has not been vacated, you now own that responsibility. You are now a landlord, even if it's only for a week. And if that tenant goes sideways, it changes everything. There's no showing up with the sheriff to vacate them. There's no packing them up. That is their domicile and they are protected there. The sheriff will not vacate them for you under that situation. It is now called a civil dispute. They're going to send you to the courts. So as a buyer, I personally would never accept a tenant after closing. If you are an investor buyer, there are municipality and county rules about what your responsibilities are with a tenant to continue having them continue to rent. So you shouldn't even advise them on that. If a buyer or investor buyer wants to buy a home with a tenant, you need to talk to your property manager, talk to a property manager and or a tenant or landlord lawyer, and let's get guidance on the laws, rules, and regulations for that municipality and the state. Don't try to understand them. I promise you, if you just try to do that to make yourself well-versed in tenant law so you can be helped, you're asking for trouble. You need to stay within your lane when it comes to tenant transactions. Now, if you are versed and you're a property manager and you have experience, that's a different thing. I get it, but you need to be very, very, very careful and don't assume that you're experienced. Don't comment that should never come out of your mouth and say, well, you need to give them 90-day notice. That's not a comment that should ever come out of your mouth. It sounds like it's common, sounds like it's standard, sounds like it makes sense, but you shouldn't even say that because guess what they're going to do? They're going to call the tenant and say, I'm giving you 90-day notice to vacate. Well, guess what? That notice in that way breaks the law. They can't call them. It has to be posted a certain way with certain language. I mean, it's that that detailed. So stay away from advising your buyers who are buying a home with a tenant involved. Now, a tenant can be anyone who is occupying the property, even if tenants are not, or occupants are not tenants. They are not named in the lease, but you can authorize them to stay on the property as a landlord. Occupants do not have financial responsibility for the lease and have no specific rights under landlord law. However, some guests that are there more than 2 weeks in any 6-month period can be considered a tenant, or will be, rather than a guest, and must be added to a lease agreement, or they're protected by the tenant laws. Occupant, we'll go with that later. So going back to representing a seller with a tenant. Before we list this house, I need you to talk to an attorney or property manager, and you tell me how you want to proceed here. I will not be talking to the tenant unless I'm told what to say and how to coordinate with them. And that's all I will do is coordinate showings as needed. But I'd rather you do it. I mean, just it's that tricky. If you're talking to a tenant and they say, well, they gave me a notice and something, you say something that slips about the seller and it's incorrect, they're going to come after both of you. I've seen it happen. So you have to be very, very careful. Even as representing a seller needs to talk to a landlord tenant attorney before you go live. And I can tell you what the advice and counsel has been over the years, but I'm going to be careful about how far I say that, because I don't want you to assume this is correct and tell your sellers this. But usually an attorney will say, do you have a good relationship with your tenant? Great. You might consider just having a conversation. I'm thinking about doing this. If I gave you X number of dollars, would that work for you to be out within a certain number of days? And then document that whole thing somehow. But again, by just because I just told you that example, do not go tell your sellers that example. Don't. That's usually when an attorney something like that will come out of an attorney's mouth, but it shouldn't come out of yours. Otherwise, if there's a mistake, guess what? If I'd have made the mistake on that other one that was $18,000, guess who's writing that check? I would have. I would have had to write that check, but I said, well, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, you said you had it handled and you knew what you're doing. Matter of fact, do you remember when I came into this that you had already had all that taken care of? And I was totally safe. And that's been 3 years ago now, over 3 years ago now. But she could have come back and said, Paul, why'd you tell me to give notice to them? And if I had said, well, what's my excuse? Well, I thought that's what I was told in the class. I thought that's what my PB, or that's what I heard on the internet or Instagram, or something crazy like that. You're going to be writing a check. It's best just to steer clear of them. I want to show you a couple other things. So even though we have in ORF advisory regarding tenant occupancies, we at the company have an additional one. And it says the following. This is provided by More Realty. And it says, talks about the complexities of the laws, regardless of your relationship or any verbal or written agreements or leases with a tenant or your role as a buyer or seller, you're encouraged to consult with a property management company as applicable or seek competent legal advice. And then we say very clearly here, it is understood that More Realty Inc., its agents, representatives, affiliates, we are not experts on this. We are not to be relied upon for legal advice or financial decisions concerning impact of landlord tenant laws or how they apply to your situation. You acknowledge you're not relying upon me. It's also understood that More Realty or representatives, et cetera, are not authorized to deliver any notifications to the tenants on behalf of any party, nor can we offer advice concerning any method, language, or timing of any notification by the seller to tenants. Sellers should seek competent legal advice and understand any and all requirements of selling a home occupied by the tenant before listing a home and before the delivery of any notices or communication of any kind related to the sale of property. If you choose to sell a property occupied by a tenant to an investor, there are potential financial implications that must be understood. In Multnomah County, for sure, if you sell a home occupied by a tenant to an investor, that there's a penalty for doing that, a financial penalty or a financial offset that you as a seller have to pay. Not a lot of people really realize that. Has to be sold to a primary residence. It gets really crazy. Purchase of a property. This may result in a request of buyer to accept tenants after closing. It is strongly recommended that buyers obtain legal counsel before you accept tenant after closing. It also means that if there's a 90-day issue notice of to vacate or to sell or whatever in play, that it's going to change your potentially change your closing timing. So you have to be very, very careful of that. property managers, or excuse me, buyers might have to get a different kind of insurance if it's occupied by a tenant after closing. So therefore, for me, so this is important for them to get if there's a tenant involved in the transaction anywhere. And the way you find out, is there a tenant involved in the transaction? No. Is there anyone staying at the home, not on a lease, that is occupying the home? Well, yeah, I got my brother-in-law. He's been living out there for 5 months. Well, okay, he's a tenant. Under Oregon law, he's a tenant. And you need to get this landlord-tenant advisory done, and they need to talk to an attorney. Okay, my brother-in-law, who seems really nice, I've already talked to him, whatever, have them get that advice about anyone occupying the home that's not on a lease or on the title, unless they're minor children, of course, that's different. Where do you find the landlord-tenant advisory? I'm going to show you here. This is the Moore back office, rolled out this month. All you do is you go up to the search here, tenant. There it is. There's one for Washington, one for Oregon. Open it, and you can download it here. It's that easy to find. While I'm here, anyone who wants to look for our escrow instructions, escrow. There it is, escrow instructions. I'm looking for Jay. There's Jay. I want to send a message to Jay. I'm picking on Jay because I think I can do that with Jay. Hi, Jay. I just sent him a message through the Moore back office. And so the search bar up here in Moore back office is really, really good to find documents and forms. Continuing on with some ORA forms. Yes, residential sales agreement. Talk about this for a minute. I could teach one class a week on every section or every page in the sales agreement, and I've done that before, but I'm only going to focus on section 32.1, possession, for the purposes of today's class. Possession is one or more tenants currently in possession of the property. Again, tenant is not always on a lease. If someone's been a guest in the house, it's not an immediate member of the family or minor children, they could be considered a tenant. So it's always good to ask the question, as you're writing these offers or taking a list, is there tenants in the property? No, I don't rent it. It's just us. Anyone else living here that's not on the deed besides your minor children? Well, yeah, I got my close friend. He's been down there. He's been in the basement for a month. Okay, he could be considered a tenant in Oregon. So I'm going to have you sign this tenant advisory addendum. And before we go live, and I'm going to take it, factor it into my stuff. That's it. And then you punt it to them. So is one or more tenants currently possess the property? Yes or no? And if you don't know as a buyer's agent, you may not know. So a seller should counter back and know. But if I don't know, I'll check no. I wish I put unknown. I wish I put that, up to seller to respond, but that's not on here. So you check the applicable box, and then if yes, select one, seller remove all tenants prior to closing, paying legally required tenant relocation costs, and deliver possession to buyer by 5 p.m. on date of closing. That is a box I check if there's a known tenant involved. I would not recommend a buyer ever take a tenant after closing. I just wouldn't. Now, if they're an investor, before you write this offer, you understand, I will check this box, but not until we got to do an investment property addendum, and there's other things we got to do involved in that. But there's reasons why I would not take a buyer after, if you're looking to use that home as my primary residence, and we got school starting in September, and I got to be in the home by September, and there's a tenant involved, there may be delays, but I would certainly not take a tenant after closing. Let the seller deal with that as a buyer's agent. If no, of course, you just check the applicable boxes. So this does not address occupancies after closing. So I'm going to bring that over really quick. Oftentimes there's an agreement to occupy after closing by a seller. I'm going to bring that over. In the occupancy to close after closing agreement, it clearly states the following: this agreement to occupy after closing is not subject to Oregon Real Estate Landlord Tenant Act. Buyer's right to evict sellers first requires issuance of a 24-hour written notice. So as long as it's under 90 days, there's no tenant laws. They're excluded from tenant laws. However, down here, the term including any extensions must not exceed 90 days to qualify for the exclusion. If day 91, they're now a tenant. And if all the applicable tenant laws apply, all tenant laws apply. I was redundant there. So you need to be very careful with that about occupancy before or after closing. Okay. Now, again, a whole class could be taught on just this addendum and the advice and counsel and what's good to use and what's not good to use in terms of language and why to do it, why not to do it. But for today's purposes, understand occupancy after closing there's no tenant, it's exempt from landlord tenant law unless it goes to day 91. Okay. The other one is occupancy before closing. Some buyer wants to get in there ahead of time because school starts. I need to get in. We don't close for 2 more weeks. I need 2-week occupancy before closing. Same rules apply. It's not subject to Oregon Residential Landlord Act, and you still have a right to vacate the buyer as a seller if they sale fail or fail on the terms. This agreement will commence not more than 90 days prior to the closing deadline. So you cannot be within 90 days before. It cannot be 91 days. Otherwise, the exclusion does not apply. You cannot rent back, or you cannot give occupancy before closing longer than 90 days. By the way, if you give it longer than days, you might have an issue with the lender too, and the insurance company, just so you know. So the term on this must not exceed 90 days to qualify for the exclusion. That's why cannot be 90 days. If transaction fails to close within blank number of days, 15 days have not filled in following written demand by seller, buyer will vacate the property. Now, as long as you give them that notice prior to 15 days or prior to that 90 days, you're hereby, day 85, yeah, you failed. Here's your official notice to vacate. You have 15 days to vacate, or 24-hour demand notice to vacate the property. You can still do that, but if you go out day 91, none of that applies. Are there questions in the chat? I'm not even watching. Let me look here. Looks like a lot of lender questions. Love the screen. You're welcome. There's that. Who do we notify the company if we're managing your own rental property? Please just send me an email, paul@morerealty.com, if you're managing your own property or managing any property for anyone. And again, you don't get to take the hat off. You have a real estate license. If you're managing property for anyone, including yourself, just send me an email to make sure we're good to go. Okay. Let's see. Required document. Yeah, in the checklist, it has a required document in SkySlope. So I'll show you that really quick. I think that's what we're going to here. If you go into SkySlope and to go any transaction, oops, SkySlope is going to say tenant advisory addendum required. It's because there's no intuitive questions to ask ahead of time. Is there a tenant involved, and then exclude or include the tenant advisory addendum? If you see that required on one of your transactions, buy side or sell side, if no tenant is involved, please go to comments and just say there's no tenant in this transaction, and it will eventually be turned off. That's probably the easiest thing to say. Okay. So don't panic when you see that. If you want to get really sophisticated, or not really sophisticated, if you want to get even more detailed on that, why is my SkySlope not opening up? It's weird. Social transaction expired. I've never seen that on SkySlope. SkySlope's clearly not perfect. Try this again. I just want to show it to you. Come on. Anyone else having trouble with SkySlope, or is this just me? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Not waiting on him anymore. You can always upload a PDF to the tenant advisory that just says no tenant. And then that will pop up for review. We don't see note. If you add a note, it doesn't pop up for review. Only a new PDF will pop up for review. So just be patient. If you in SkySlope, if you see a tenant advisory addendum required, just put in there no tenant in this transaction. It'll eventually get cleared out. Hopefully that answered that question from Tammy. Yeah, so if it doesn't apply, don't have them sign it. If you take a listing or with a buyer and there is no tenant involved, we don't need the form. That's just a SkySlope weakness. We have to always ask for it because we can't decide when it's applicable, or the system won't let us decide when it's applicable, if that makes sense, Tammy. Hopefully that helped, Tammy. I thought it was 60 days after closing that a seller would calculate a lender. So Janet, yeah, so those addendums say it's up to 90 days. A lender might have their own criteria. Some lenders don't allow it, period. So before you go occupancy before or after closing, you probably should check with a lender or make sure the lender is good with it. Because sometimes they just won't. So, and they might have the different criteria, but the form, state law, is exempt for 90 days, but the lender might have their own issues. Or there are situations like tenant who will stay in an ADU after closing, or tenants who will stay in a duplex or fourplex. Yeah, so I think Jonathan is answering your question. In a estate sale, if there's a member of the family still in the home of the deceased, probably, I would say, Connie, I would err on the side of caution of that. If anyone's staying in the home longer than 2 weeks, they could be subject to tenant law. So it might need to have some sort of addendum that says home will be vacated prior to closing by any occupant, or something in the transaction or in an addendum. So all parties know when we show up and get and unlock that door, there's no one there. Sean, who creates a seller demand for the buyer to vacate the seller demand? So who creates it? I think as an agent, you're still in the transaction. Oh, maybe I can get back in here now. And I'm still having trouble with Sky Slope, Sean. I'll have to come back to that maybe, but there's going to have to be some sort of letter of demand or some sort of sale failure. If a buyer's in occupancy, it's sale failed. Here's the terms of our sale failed because you failed to close. There's going to be a termination and some sort of a letter or demand attached to it that potentially an attorney can help with. It might be advisable to have an attorney spend the $300 or $400, have an attorney write one up. That might be advised. War Home RSVP sent you an email. Thank you, Lilia. It's Skyslope. I've been having so much trouble with Skyslope lately. I'm glad I'm not the only one having trouble with Skyslope. You're welcome, Tammy. Okay, Jen. Okay, great. So Skyslope's back up. So I'm going to go in here and show you exactly what that looks like. So you get it. So I'm going to manage transactions. And if I open up any transaction in the checklist, there's always going to be a tenant advisory addendum required. Oh, of course I grabbed a vacant land one, so that wouldn't have one. Just a second. Duh. Let's find a residential. Looks like that's a residential here. Checklist. Why am I not finding it? What did I do wrong here? Okay. I don't want to go the effort. Oh, okay. I keep grabbing the wrong one. That doesn't applicable. It's not applicable here. So thank you for that. Okay. Try this one. Checklist.
Number 8.
Number 8. Thank you. Right here. Tenant advisory form, more Realty. You can find this form on Basecamp. So only if applicable. It's changed to if applicable. But on most of the forms, correct me if I'm wrong, managing brokers, it should say required until it's changed to not applicable. Is that correct? Reviewing brokers? Any of you are there?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So if you see it as applicable in the buy side or on the sell side, just make a note. You just make a note. I'm going to grab an Oregon one. Okay, never mind. I'm not, it's too hard. I don't have that quite queued up for simplicity. But if it's on a listing side, same thing. If that says required, more tenant advisory required, simply put no tenant in the property, or load up a PDF that just a blank PDF so it pops up on our screen, or a PDF that says no tenant involved, and then that will get cleared out. But we cannot turn it off. Now, if the system SkySlope had allowed us to ask questions and it was more intuitive, it said, is there a tenant involved, yes or no? That would trigger the addition or requirement of that form, yes or no. That would fix that, but the SkySlope does not presently allow for that. Other questions? Find a listing site. Okay, I'll see if I can find a listing site here really quick, Jay. Problem, okay, here's one. Make sure I grab one that's not. Checklist. Again, I'm okay. I should take too much time to grab a queued up one. Sorry about that. But if you see it and it's not applicable on any transaction, buy side or sell side, just put a note, no tenant in the property, and we will clear it out. Is that fair enough to say? We talked about that. There are a couple of attorneys. I'll put people here in the chat, copy, paste locally that can help with these things. Kevin Ike, we work with all the time. Pete Myers, he does a lot of evictions and stuff as applicable. But again, don't act like the attorney. Direct them to attorneys or to property managers. Okay, I already did that. So in the end, very, very, very best advice. Don't try and learn the tenant laws. This is the very best advice I can give. You'll be tempted to try and help, which will get you into trouble if you're not careful and put you, your clients, and the crosshairs of significant fines or even lawsuits. And in tenant laws, you're guilty until you're never proven innocent. You're just guilty. You just have to pay. You end up having to pay money because at a minimum, you almost have to offer relocation. So as a seller, you're just, unless you can work something out with your seller, which is lawyer can often guide you how to do, which is why you want to get to an attorney. And then stay in your lane. You're not in any way, shape, or form a tenant law expert and must not advise your buyers or sellers concerning tenants in a transaction, nor should you be guiding anyone in any situation regarding this. You are licensed, that would put you in the crosshair. So if you try to guide anyone, even in a helpful way, you can't take the license hat off and the E&O in the crosshairs. Some people just want to go after E&O. They're out there. And frankly, that one gal that I told you about a few minutes ago, where she decided to sue that seller, the seller called her and said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Well, I was told by this real estate agent I could just get some money. So I just, where's my check? I'm going to use it for my closing cost." That's ridiculous. Now I have an issue with that just because I don't condone that, but I'm just saying those are the risk factors out there. When people are being told there's a free money, just call an attorney, they'll get you a check for $15,000. And I don't like that. But anyway, questions, you can unmute if you want. Oh, do you have any contract attorneys who work with Southern Oregon that you would refer? You might call either one of those and see who they might refer down in Southern Oregon. I personally don't have anyone in Southern Oregon. People can unmute with questions. You can unmute or put it in the chat. I'm happy to answer any questions about anything, about the tenant stuff or about anything at all. And if you don't, that is fine too. It's hard to be so direct about a tenant law thing like this because we're in real estate because we want to help people, right? We naturally want to do that. But that's one of the tenant laws is one of those things you have to be very, very careful of, not to delve into areas which you really may not have any expertise in. Reading the chat. So Lily, what's ROA? I've not heard that one.
It is a membership called Rental Owners Association.
Gotcha. Okay.
And they have webinars that give real estate agents CE credit. But I mainly joined because of that very thing that you talked about today. I don't want to get in trouble for doing something wrong. And they have a gal named, oh, what is her name? Her name is, hold on. Oh. I forget what her name is, but she is the president of ROA, and she is on call. Like, you can get her cell phone number and she will help you through any questions or support with rental. And
Yeah.
I think that's huge just because, I mean, the membership is like $150 or something. It's super, super cheap for the whole year. It's well worth it. if you're managing your own properties, because like I'm managing my own properties, so.
Yeah, certainly if you manage your own properties, and please don't, I'm not being disrespectful to you at all, but don't go join that membership so you can advise your clients for a buyer seller. That's not what she's saying. So please don't go do that, because that's not a role you should play. You shouldn't play mediator. Your attorney said to do this. They just need to talk to their attorney or property manager directly. That's really, so I know that's not what you were saying. I just want to make sure I was clear.
Yeah, different hat, right? Like I'm putting
Different hat. Yep.
hat.
different
Yep.
hat. So someone's asking about the Remax and Keller Williams lawsuits back east. And you probably saw that Remax and used to be Realty, I can never remember their new name now. Anyways, Realty, both just settled some lawsuits that some sellers had filed against certain real estate firms and MLSs in the Midwest. It was huge dollars. I think the whole total lawsuit was like $500 million or something crazy. It was staggering. And if John was on here, he's attended a conference, he could probably tell more about it, or other people could too. But Remax settled their part of it for 55 million. I think it was last week, and the week before, the Realty suite of companies, they settled for 85 million. Basically, there was this collusion about there was this claim or this accusation of collusion between the MLSs and firms that for price fixing and not being allowed access to the MLS data. There's a lot of stuff involved. Some have asked me, what's this do to us? Well, right now, nothing's changed. The MLS here in the NAR has tried to stay in the forefront, seeing some of this stuff coming, and put some language and listing agreements and NAR participating MLSs that disclose what buyer and seller say. Some sellers don't want to pay buyers. Okay, I always understood the listing contract between, Beth Silva as a seller, the listing contract is between me and Beth, and I'm going to get dollars for that. What I choose of those dollars is up to me. I'm choosing to cooperate with Andy Burnett to bring a buyer. Hey, Andy, if you bring a buyer, I'll split my commission with you. That's how I understood the dynamic of it. But because of so many misinterpretations, misunderstanding of how this actually works, it has created an environment where sellers are now starting to say, I'm not paying a buyer. Well, you never were paying a buyer's agent, you were paying me, and I was choosing to split it. So what you're going to see out of this over time, I believe, is some downward pressure on commissions charged. I think, my personal opinion, am I worth 5% of $1 million house? Really? Am I really worth? I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm cheapening the industry, but as prices have gone up, the commissions really haven't changed that much in the last 8 or 9, 10 years, 15 years. So it's, for sellers who are getting savvy, like, are you really worth, what am I paying for? 20 years ago, I paid 5% to sell my $125,000 house, and now I'm paying 5% to sell $1 million. So you see all these questions coming up from sellers. But on the other hand, if some sellers in a competitive market, seller A says, well, I'm not going to pay a buyer's agent commission. I'm paying you 2.5% to sell my house. That's it. But seller B says, I will pay a buyer's agent commission. I'll allow that to occur, or I'll participate in that, whatever it looks like. Which house is more competitive? Which has more exposure? So it's just going to kind of create this interesting dynamic that evolves, I think. I do think over time, you'll see a downward pressure on commissions that we charge. Right, wrong, good, bad, or indifferent. I just think that kind of thing's coming, which I think makes models like us in real estate even more attractive over time, where we're not taking 30% of a check or 20% of a check, because 20% of a check is a whole different dollar figure than $3.95, right? Which is what we charge. So I think models like ours become more attractive and grow more because people want to retain their money more over time. I think you'll see changes in MLS practices and maybe some language changes, disclosing better about, do you opt in to let the listing agent share their commission, that kind of thing. I can't remember the company that was around. They've since gone into business. It's not Red. It's Rex. I think it was Rex Real Estate. They were already doing that kind of thing. They would go in the MLS and other places, or they go have their own website, and they'd put a listing on, and their whole pitch was, list with me, and you'll save 2.5% because we don't pay any buyer's agent commissions. Well, what they were missing is exposure. They refused to join the MLS, which were all tens of thousands, millions of real estate agents are. And so they had limited exposure in their properties, and they're out of business. They went bankrupt. But all these things are, I mean, look, this is, I don't know how many billions or trillions of dollars flow through the real estate community, mortgages, appraisals, real estate agents, I mean, refis, all that stuff. It's a huge amount of money. There's going to be people wanting their piece of that action or try and disrupt that. That's just always happens. Happened in telecom, happened in, whatever, and back in 2009 with the whole Dodd-Frank Act, appraisers and loan officers were in the crosshairs, and they got hugely adjusted to how they had to do business. We didn't. But I remember saying at the time, well, wow, we dodged that bullet. We didn't get lumped into all that, but the day will come when we are. It's just too much money, and there's too many, it's too easy for the public to get mad. It's too easy for them to share their displeasure. And it's a very litigious world out there right now. So that's just a matter of time. So those companies have settled. I imagine the others will settle too, because the trial is supposed to start in October. My guess is I wouldn't be surprised to see them all settle out. But I wouldn't be surprised to see some practices and changes or disclosures or whatever roll forward over some time. Someone asked, what about more Realty? Are you going to get sued for price fixing? We're not deep pockets. I'm sorry. Remax and them, they could write a check for $85-55 million. I wish we could do that, but we're not that. So we're not like a large company with deep pockets. So we're fine. We're healthy. We're paying the bills. We're, all this stuff. So don't go the other extreme with that. But there's going to be some changes in the industry as a result of all this. There's chats like going like crazy here. Holy moly. Let me try and get caught up. So Max Keller. More allows finding tenant fee for landlord. Yeah, so if a landlord wants to pay you a referral fee for helping find a tenant or open doors, we've done that. We've accommodated for that. We don't even have the money passed through us because usually like $50. It's not worth our time. What is the appropriate way to say that the buyer should understand the tenant laws in the listing? So the best thing to do is give them that landlord tenant advisory addendum. Let's see if I got that still down here, opened up. Provide this and refer them to an attorney before you do anything. And then what is the appropriate way to say that the buyer should understand the tenant laws in the listing? That's kind of up to them, and it's sort of spelled out in all the paperwork you should be using as part of WARF. In the listing, disclose that there's a tenant in the property, buyer should do their due diligence, that kind of thing. I think is all you got to say in private remarks even. And then as a buyer's agent, you should make sure that you're providing correct forms. I have a duplex listing and I get requests for showings of tenant occupied units. So it's up to the tenant if they're going to cooperate with showings. Oftentimes what I've seen with tenants who don't cooperate with showings is right offer subject to interior inspection. And meaning your offer is subject to me finally getting in there at some point to being able to see it. Oh, there's a whole, Eric put a link in here for the settling of the lawsuit, which probably explains more about what the worldview of that is from NAR. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to speak to commissions really quick. Something that should never escape any of our lips in any form, any way, publicly or between us is, I'm not going to show that home because they're not paying enough. Or I'm not going to, how dare you list lower than 5%? I've seen people on Facebook literally say, how dare you agents list lower than 5% and share less than 2.5% with us? That is called price fixing. It's against federal law. That is what's put us in the crosshairs as real estate agents. Too many people running their mouth trying to preserve and collude to keep their commissions high. You can't do that. That's literally price fixing, and it's illegal, which is why NAR and many other people have tried to say, please stop doing that. Please stop addressing commissions in public forums and between each other and trying to look like we are working together to keep commissions at a certain level. You can't do that. If a home's got a 0% commission, make a decision. Do you want to show it or not? But don't go try and beat someone up or go scream on public forum. They're only not paying me. They should be doing 2.5%, which is traditional and customary. None of that should be said at all. And I know as agents, and sometimes we get really protective of commission, we get really, but I've seen it go to the point where it is or be perceived as price fixing, and that will get our industry in trouble. You gotta be very, very careful of that. Matter of fact, in our policy and procedure manual I'm rewriting, I have some clauses in there that address that we as a company, well, if there are some firms that over the past have said you cannot list below 6% or list below 5%, that's price fixing. That's a classic example of price fixing. We've never had that. I've never been at a firm where I would allow it because it's price fixing. So we will never say you can never list below. We will never give you a minimum maximum you have to list for. You just need to know at closing is $395. Whatever, you can do it all for free. I don't care. You pay us at $395 at closing. That's it. The reason some of these other firms were very protective of that is they were taking a percent of the gross. So we're trying to protect their income. Well, so you can't list below 6% or 5% because it's money out of our pocket. Again, that's price fixing. So, little word to the wise. Has anything had pushback re tenant occupied requirements from seller who's have had a long time limit? Great question. I'm not sure how to answer that. There's so many variables out there. My guess is if we ask or look deep enough, we're going to find plenty of examples with that. But the same was addressed the same way. If a tenant does not cooperate, you're stuck waiting. As a matter of fact, if the seller goes through the process and the buyer, the whole process, and they're fully legal, and at the end of all that, the tenant does not vacate on the day they're supposed to be out, there's limited options. You can call the sheriff, you can show them all these documents and forms they agreed to, the sheriff can say, well, go to court. They can't pack them up and kick them out the door unless there's a document that says they can't. Now that all that process, all that paperwork allows you stuff to take to the court to then instruct the sheriff to go do that. But just because a tenant doesn't get out on time, doesn't mean the sheriff's going to show up and move them out. Anyway, so that doesn't really answer your question, Renee, but do you see sellers marketing their home for less because they have not seen that yet? So we have not felt the impact of any downward pressure on commissions, or like I said, the Rex company, they were trying to shake up the entire industry. And matter of fact, they were so mad they couldn't succeed at their own business model. They were trying to sue other companies because we couldn't succeed. Well, you didn't succeed because it was a model that wasn't whatever. So I don't think that went anywhere that I'm aware of. But I have not seen sellers say, buy our home, we're not paying a buyer's agent commission, kind of as a marketing ploy. As terms of a practice, I personally have not seen much changes. Someone else here may have, but I haven't. Buyers should pay their own commission to be able to negotiate just like sellers. So you always can do that. You can always charge a buyer. But common practice has been listing commission goes to me, and I choose to sell in a cooperative manner with the people. Now, if a seller says I'm only paying 2.5%, I could take my listing and say I'm paying 0%. Ask your buyer for your commission. I could put that in listing right now. And there are going to be some agents who won't show it or refuse to talk to their buyers to try and get some sort of compensation from them. But you certainly can ask for a buyer for compensation. I've done it. And the buyer has to make a choice. Hey, look, they're not paying me anything. Will you pay me a couple $1,000 for my time or whatever it was? And they could say yes or no. I'll be honest, the 2 or 3 times that it happened, what they said is, I don't want to buy that house if they're that weird. Okay, whatever. I mean, they just made their own decision. You're welcome for the presentation. So when we would do comps, would you tell seller their home is worth less because of? No, comps have nothing to do with commissions. Comps have value of the home. So that's where you have to be careful about saying, well, it comps less or comps more because we're not paying buyer's agent commission. That is not a thing. That's not an appraised value. That's not a value an appraiser will use or quantify. They just look at the structure, look at the comps and say it comps out at $950,000. And then you might get an offer for $2 million. So what's it worth? It's what the cash buyer is willing to pay. It's worth the $2 million. So yeah, that doesn't apply. Is getting worse, and I've lose because they're agents. So worse or just changing. Yeah, I see it. Some our agents are charging 4%. You might lose a listing over it, but you got to be competitive. It's always been that way. My first listing I took for 7.5%. My very first listing back in whatever, and I mean it's just been downward pressure ever since. And it might come to that where, okay, 4%, but I'm agreeing to cooperate. I'm gonna do all these things and, I'm gonna offer 1.5% or 1% or 2%. Deal, if you don't want to do it, then you don't have to do it. But it is competitive out there. I hate to say it, but it's competitive. And becoming more so. So when I say you're gonna feel some changes, downward pressure, that's what you're gonna start seeing. You're gonna start seeing sellers say, well, I'm not paying 5, I'll pay 4. And if you don't want to do it, you have a decision to make. There's no one forcing them to pay 5. There's no one forcing you to take 4. I'm not trying to be rude or disrespectful to anybody by saying it in the way I did, but that's just it. You have to make decisions. You're welcome. You're welcome. How many sellers have my sellers look at comps to set BAC? I have my sellers look at comps to set BAC. Is that okay? I'm not quite sure. You might have to come off mute and explain that one.
He's asking about commission. He's showing the comps of sales commissions probably.
I show the other listings in the area to show what the common BAC is and have my sellers pick.
Oh, I got what you're saying. You actually show them what's being offered out there and paid. And okay, gotcha. Now, as a listing agent, I'm going to say, look, it's competitive too. We can do the 4. That's fine. I'll take it. But just know it's going to be in the listing for 1.5 or 2 or whatever it is on this form that you have to agree to. And here's some other just so you can see others are charging, they're paying 2.5%, 3% or whatever. I mean, I don't think there's anything illegal or wrong with that. But a seller just has to make a decision.
Yeah,
But
that's what I was checking.
if I'm selling $1.5 million property, okay, 5% gets me what? I'm paying 5 times $1 million. How much is that? I mean, it's a lot of money. $1.5 million at 5%. I mean, someone tell me what it is. Is that what? $35,000 or something like that? $75,000 for you to put in the MLS and get an offer in 3 days. And then we're closing in 30. Is it really worth you making $20,000 an hour? Sellers are going to start doing that. I would if I sell my house. So just keep it in mind that's what you start seeing. Sellers becoming more savvy, becoming more knowledge. Wait, that's negotiable? I didn't know that. You're gonna start seeing that. Manufactured home commissions, it can be low 4%, but 4% at 50,000 is like almost nothing. You can always have a buyer pay it. There are people in our company who are doing manufactured homes exclusively and making a killing doing it. An absolute killing because one, people think it's not worth anything. So not many people will do it, but they understand how to negotiate and say, okay, buyer, you're paying me this, seller, you're paying me this, I'll do it. If you want your $60,000 mobile home, great, it's going to cost you 20. Factor, you see that. I think a percentage with a set minimum and maximum amount is fair. Yes, you're listed for cooperating listings. If you're listening to zero BAC, is it really co-op listing? I get it. I get the comment. I do. I mean, to put it in there and offer no compensation for cooperating seems weird. And I'm not sure that's really cooperative. But one of the things they're suing for in the Midwest is for us to make the MLSs available to anyone who wants in there, not just agents. That's one of the things we're trying to get through. So just watch. There's going to be changes and evolutions, and we just got to adapt with them. That's just what I always tell people this. I've said this many times the last couple of weeks. What's the 11th commandment? You got 10 commandments. What's the 11th? Be flexible. And there's another book called Who Moved My Cheese? The cheese is always moving right now. And so you can either sit down and pout, and I'm not accusing anyone of pouting. We can sit down and kind of, why did my cheese move? Or find the cheese. Where's the opportunity? How do I get to where the opportunity moved to? And that's going to happen at some level within real estate, I believe. And again, I don't think it'll go down to zero. I think there's but you're going to start seeing some different adjustments and pressures on things like commissions and sellers becoming more savvy. Why am I paying 5% on $1.5 million house? Why would I pay $75,000? I'll give you $10,000. You're going to see it. And you have a choice. You want the $10,000 or not? I had someone who had a house for sale. by owner paying $100 to a buyer's agent. And I called and said, okay, you're just gonna pay $100. That's all I'm gonna make on this? Yep. Okay, I guess I'll just let my buyers know I'm not gonna get involved. I'll let them know if they want to come see it. Because I won't be able, you're gonna walk away from $100, $100 easy dollars. And I'm like, yeah, no, not worth it. $100 becomes like $5 in my pocket at the end of the day. I'm not gonna do it. And he was so mad at me because I was not going to bring my buyers. I said, I'm not going to bring them. Not for $100 or what it was, 100, maybe it's $500, call it $500. But it wasn't above that. I'll let them know, and if they want to contact you directly, that's up to them. What's their names? I'm not telling you that. That's what I get paid for. I'll let them know the information on it, and you have to give that to me. Why? Why do I have to give that to it? So you see some of that stuff sometimes where that kind of stuff's been going on. But I agree with your. Is that my glasses are kind of not right here? Is that Marisa? I'm sorry if I said that wrong. I agree. If you put 0 in there, is that really cooperating? Yeah, I don't think so. Thanks, Paul. There's so much good insights in this commission discussion. Great. Okay, so I got great. And I have a hard stop right now. I have to get going to an appointment. I appreciate everybody being on here. We still have 120. Everybody's dropping off now since I said that. So we had 130 people on a second ago, but appreciate y'all being here. Glad all the new people. It's good to see you. I see a lot of new faces. I see Andy, I haven't met. Freedom, that's a cool name. Jay, I met. Jamie Lynn, I met just recently. And Mary, I mean, Melissa, it's just great to see so many people here. I'm glad you're here. And if you have any questions, let us know, and we'll talk to you soon.